Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the kitchen table. It's a very special kitchen table this time because, well, as we've had occasionally in the past, David Evans from Autosport magazine has joined us at the kitchen table. And Motorsport News has joined us at the kitchen table because we want to talk. It was effectively the halfway point in the season, David. We want to talk about young drivers, partly because we've seen young drivers making breakthroughs this year. But what I'd like to put to you, David Evans, is a scenario. And that scenario is this. Might happen one day, who knows? The FIA decide that the third cars in the manufacturer teams can only be driven by under 27-year-old drivers. So it opens up the market to young drivers effectively. There are one or two out there who are probably just about ready to step into World Rally cars. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on basically if that seat became available right now, a seat in a World Rally car for an under 27-year-old, who is best prepared for it?
Inevitably, you've got to say Kalle Rovanperä, haven't you? Well, apparently not.
Well, you say inevitably. Kalle Rovanperä is clearly the name that comes to mind first, but I'd say there are two or three.
Right.
I would say Rovanperä is one. I would say potentially after his explosive debut in the ERC that young Oliver Solberg is another, because he seems to be able to handle just about anything that's thrown at him. But the other one that we will talk, Gus Greensmith, is a... Listen, apologies for the microphone. We were waiting for some new kit to turn up today and it hasn't. So apologies for this, but we'll make this work.
We weren't waiting. Colin was waiting.
I was waiting for... And it might arrive halfway through the interview, but but we won't be using it. Well, let's go through those three then. You say Kalle Rovanperä. I'd agree with you. He is a very, very impressive young man indeed. Talk, obviously, about a seat potentially at Toyota next year. They clearly think he's ready now to step up straight into the World Rally car.
He didn't have the easiest of starts to the year, did he? I mean, we saw him in Sweden, Monty as well. When not easy, and then suddenly got to Chile, and it worked. He drove a Talksport car in Chile. And he just seemed to put all of the issues and the problems, and they weren't really problems. I mean, Sweden, he just ditched it in a snowbank. But it wasn't, he came into the year and everybody was talking about Kalle Rovanperä. By now he should have had WRC2 Pro sewn up, and he should be really looking forward to a Yaris for the second half of the year. It didn't quite work out that way, but what that's shown for me is the character. Portugal, we kind of overlooked the fact that he'd never been there before. And he delivered he was in a new car, but he delivered a very professional job very quickly. And Oliver Solberg, absolutely. But we need to see Oliver having more experience. We need to see him doing more events. But for sure, there's a natural raw talent there. There's no doubt.
Let's just talk a wee bit more. We'll go on to Oliver in a second. Let's talk a little bit more about Rovanperä, because as you say, an interesting start to the year. It kind of mirrors, you'd have to say, the start he had last year as well. It was very similar. It was a stuttering start to 2018 that we saw. What impressed me more than just about anything in Portugal was the pace, and the pace is always there, and that's the most impressive thing. When he has a clean run, it's astonishing. It's 10, 15 seconds quicker than anyone.
But it's not even a clean run. It's when he needs to push. Right. This is the difference, isn't it?
Which is what happened. He had that problem, didn't he, in Portugal? When was it? Was it early on the Saturday? Was it late the Friday?
Puncture or something, was it?
Exactly, and he found himself behind Kopecky, who is an absolute master at controlling situations. Kopecky impresses me, strangely enough, for a guy who's now in his mid-30s, more and more every time I see him. But you kind of thought, Kopecky's got the mature head on the shoulders, the old shoulders. He knows this rally. He knows how to get through. It's now going to be difficult for Rovanperä. But within a couple of stages, he didn't let the pressure get to him.
No.
He basically thought, I can go quickly, so I will go quickly. And he caught him very, very quickly indeed.
But I don't even think he went that quickly.
No.
I think he just increased it slightly. Maybe there was a couple of moments to come back because he knew he'd got time. And he had a plan of how to come back, and he just did it. And as you say, that was very impressive.
And you know what else impressed me? And we don't see this in all young drivers. He actually looks as if he's enjoying his rallying. He looks as if he loves rallying. What we see with other youngsters, and you can understand it because there is massive pressure. It's an enormously expensive sport. Quite often it's family businesses, it's family members who are paying for it. And that in itself generates enormous pressure on these youngsters. They don't get unlimited opportunities to prove themselves, and you see them at stage ends and you think, listen, if I was a 21, 22-year-old driving this car, I'd be driving it with a smile on my face. Yeah. It's rare to see that. But Rovanperä genuinely seems to love every second in his car.
And the other aspect that he's really picked up on, and this is the last 2 or 3 years since we've been working with him, his ability at the end of the stage to get the message across, to talk, just to deal with the media. And as you say, he generally does it with a smile on his face, and that side of things is a real step forward for me.
And he has a laugh. He really does have a laugh, which is great, and you have to have a laugh. Let's talk then a little bit more about, as you say, Oliver Solberg. I understand your, not concerns, but I understand your slight hesitation, your reservations about Solberg. We haven't seen enough of him. But what we have seen of him every single time impresses me. He got into that supercar in rallycross in Norway, and he could drive that at 15 years old. This year he's gone to the States. Now, David Higgins, don't underestimate what David Higgins can do in the States. Don't forget Chris Atkinson couldn't beat him. No, exactly. Don't forget that Patrick Sandell couldn't beat him.
And these events in Australia, in America, I've done a couple of them, and they are so specific. Ooh. They're not like roads anywhere else in Europe, and the recce rules are different, the tyres are very different. And when he jumped into that car, and that's a massively different car to what he's been used to driving. Simply in terms of size, it's a much bigger thing. David Higgins knows those rallies absolutely like the back of his hand. And he's quick.
He is quick.
He's always been a quick guy. And I think it was surprising to see Oliver so quick on the first event, but then on the second one out there to win it. The thing was, it was real commitment there, really wide, fast roads, and he just wasn't scared of it. He got in it and just absolutely drove it.
That's what I like, the fact that he can quite comfortably cope with the speed. Yeah. Not always the case with youngsters. The step up in speed sometimes takes a little bit of getting used to. He's dealing with that step up in speed. Maybe that's a throwback to that season in the rallycross car where the speeds were phenomenal.
And talking to him about that, he said it was easier because he drove an R2 car for the first time, and he said when you've driven a car with 500 or 600 horsepower, it's easier to take a smaller car quickly to the limit. And I think you're absolutely right. I think he was used to so much speed into corners, and he could deal with it. And it's almost a psychological thing that you can slow your brain down quickly enough to do that. And then for sure, when he came to the polo, that it was it was Latvia. He won the first one, he won the second one in the snow, and then the last one in Liepāja was superb. And the way that he did it, I think he was beaten on one stage or something.
Just such consistent pace. And again, what I was impressed by was the fact that pace wasn't a forced pace. It was the pace he was comfortable at. He said,
he completely managed it, didn't he?
Against possibly one of the fastest drivers we have ever seen in that championship. Okay, a flawed driver, but one of the, in terms of raw speed, he is one of the quickest. Lukanyuk, however you say it. Yeah. And you know what? Solberg's pace was impressive. And as I say, he dealt with it, which makes me think that he will deal with the next step up, which is the World Rally Car. As you say, maybe a little bit more experience, but I have no reservations about him jumping up and coping with that extra pace in the World Rally Car.
We saw was it the Monza Rally or something last year or the year before, when he drove a World Rally Car.
Watch my microphone! Sorry, mate. You said before we started, Colin, I have to be careful of this microphone.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. Right,
let's move on from the Monza Rally, but I agree with you.
He drove a World Rally Car, and he lost narrowly to Rovanperä, but he beat Teemu Sulinen. First time he'd ever sat in a World Rally Car.
Incredible stuff. I am very much looking forward.
Hadn't you?
I had forgotten that, but this is why he comes along, because he reminds me of all these things. Third driver that we said perhaps was ready for that step up immediately. Well, he's already taken the step up because he was in the World Rally Car in Portugal, and I have to say before we start, one of the best debuts. I'm going to say this. One of the best debuts in a World Rally Car we have seen in a very, very long time. Tiedemann in Sweden 6 or 7 years ago was very, very impressive. But these new World Rally Cars are a different beast altogether. And he got into the car. He drove it quicker than I expected. He drove it more consistently. He made that small error on Saturday evening, which was really unfortunate. But other than that, I'm giving him a 9 out of 10 for that, because I thought it was a fantastic debut, and it shows promise.
It does, and you talk about, you know, a strong debut. We look back to Teemu Sunanen when he first drove the car, and he showed real speed. Poland, exactly.
You didn't remember that, did you?
I was going to say Finland. I can remember the fast rally, but and that's the thing. We talked a lot about the jump.
It wasn't Poland. It was the one before.
No, it was Poland.
He was 6th or 7th in Poland, but I think he'd done one before that.
Sardinia, was it? Or
yeah,
something?
I think it was. Poland was his second event, and he finished really strongly in Poland, and then went on to Finland. And we
should know this stuff. We should know it. But
we
anyway,
do know it.
Moving on. What was I saying? So we talked about the differences between the step between R5 and a World Rally car, and it was everybody was concerned. It was huge. You know, we introduced the WRC Trophy in 2017 to give that stepping stone. Drivers who can drive don't need it. They can make that step. And I have reservations about pretty much every driver that makes that step. Rovanperä, Solberg, maybe not. Gus Greensmith, I wasn't sure, but my goodness me, that was sensational. And by his own admission, when he first tested the car in November, it was a bit of a leap. But he didn't do any more testing from November till the week before Portugal. And it just the speed and, like you said, a consistency and the calmness about the guy. You know,
the calmness.
He was stress.
He looked as if he rightly deserved his place in the World Rally car, and I was enormously impressed. Less than a second a kilometre behind the top boys in a number of stages is some going, really some going, and much less than that, I think, on one or two of the stages.
And let's not forget, you know, running in a difficult place on Sunday was first on the road. So you know, I mean, and to deal with that, it was good. Potentially, you could say he worked on Friday with the right place on the road. I don't know, but you know, equally nobody had made notes for Friday before. Nobody knew their way around. So was that easier to get in there? I don't know. But certainly he was more comfortable on Saturday, where he knew the roads a bit more.
You know, he's had a difficult year, I would say, a year. He's had ups and downs. He really has had ups and downs in terms of his performances. You know, Monte Carlo this year, fantastic. Sweden, where was he? He had been up and down, and that is why I have never, ever, ever doubted his raw speed. Gus Greensmith, right from the first days that I saw him in the British Rally Championship in the little R2 cars,
he is
brave. He's brave. And I remember he actually did a test in Portugal, that still quite a secret test, with a top-line World Rally driver who said to me after that test, he is one of the bravest boys I have ever sat with. He just has some raw edges. Now, that was 4 years ago now, 3-4 years ago. Clearly those edges are being just slightly trimmed, aren't they?
Absolutely.
What do you think? What do you think the potential for Greensmith is? Dodgy chair. For the rest of this year in particular?
We've got to see, haven't we? You know, does he get another run in a World Rally car? Let's hope so. You know, it would be great to see him in Rally GB. He has slightly more experience of the conditions here. Not a lot more, because, you know, he's not a driver that spent 5 or 6 years competing in Britain, but it would be amazing to see him compete in GB. Beyond that, you know, we're going into Sardinia next week. That'll be a struggle, because it's back to the older spec R5 car. But then we've got Finland, we've got the new R5 car, and he's done a lot of development work with that. That, for me, Finland is quite a pivotal event for him, because he goes well on really quick rallies. He'll have the new car. You know, we almost need him to see him come out and probably win WRC2 Pro there on speed, beat Osberg in the car, and then that would be a great launch pad into the second half of the year. And then beyond that, who knows? You know, if he goes well in GB in a World Rally car, if he's there in a World Rally car, who knows what's possible for next year? But certainly, he did not look out of place in that car among that company. Yeah,
and he fully deserved to be there. I don't care how he got there. You know, don't ever forget that rallying, as we mentioned earlier on, is an expensive sport. Someone has to pay for it. You know, the fact that it comes, the finance comes from the family business. You know, I read some awful quotes over the course of the weekend in Portugal. I thought, you know what, rallying is about money. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, forget it, because, you know, he got in the car, he shut the door, he got on with it, and he was quick.
He was really quick.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
All that matters, David Evans. Now, so to wrap up the first part of our little discussion here, drivers who perhaps are ready to step into a World Rally car, say 1st of January next year, out of the 3 we've discussed, you've got 1 seat. You've been given a seat, David Evans. Which of those 3 goes in your seat?
I'll go with the Brit.
Yes, I do like that. I was going to go with the Brit, but I thought he would go with Rovanperä. That's a brave one, and I'm going with you. I'm going with you. It's a very, very brave one. Maybe Rovanperä needs another year. Is that what we're saying? I think ultimately Rovanperä may achieve more in the sports than Greensmith, but I think Greensmith has a part to play. I think he's got a big part to play, and I think potentially he'll win rallies. Yeah. I can see Rovanperä winning championships.
Yeah, you asked me for one driver. I've given you one driver.
She's getting a little bit arsey with me now. Quite all right. Okay, let's move on, David Evans. So, we've talked about drivers who are fairly well established. Let's go a little bit left field now. Let's look beyond that. So we're going to go to, say, under 24s now in the World Rally Car. So drivers that maybe have caught your eye that perhaps don't quite have the profile of the likes of Rovanperä, Solberg and Greensmith as yet, who maybe in a year or two might be knocking on the door for one of those seats which have been reserved for young drivers. Who should we kick off with? Do you want to kick off with one that's maybe caught your eye over the last year or two?
No.
Okay, well, I'll kick off with mine. He hasn't read the scripts. Tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to go. I've made him put his notes across there earlier. I'm going to go to the other side of the world.
Right.
And
Harry Bates.
Yeah, but here's the issue. I'm going to go with Bates.
Right.
And I'm going to go with one of the Master Bates.
Right. That wasn't in the script.
I can't decide on which one to go with. So there are two young Bateses. Yeah. There's young Harry Bates and there's young Lewis Bates. Yeah. They come from, my goodness me, we talk about Oliver Solberg coming from the right kind of genes, the right kind of family.
Australian dynasty, isn't it?
It is Australian rallying dynasty. Sons of Neil Bates. Yeah. Do you know what? There are AP4 cars this year, the Toyotas, and both Harry and Lewis, for me, are showing real potential. And Harry, I know you're the one that's winning the rallies, but your wee brother is keeping you honest out there. We know how difficult it is for drivers to come from that part of the world and establish themselves in the World Rally Championship. I'd love to see them in Europe and really to test exactly where their level's at. But for me, those two youngsters, there's potential there.
There is, absolutely, and historically we've seen it obviously with Hayden, but we saw it as well with Chris Atkinson. It is possible to come across from there, and they're with the right brand. Toyota is a global brand with a big sort of seat of power in that region as well. So yeah, but I mean, you know far more about Australian rallying than I do, but for sure when I saw Harry in Rally Oz last year, very strong and really a good guy to work with as well.
Well prepared in terms of his upbringing. Well prepared in terms of the way he presents himself. He's got all the tools necessary. Whether he can take those tools and make a career in the World Championship out of those tools, we won't know until he comes to Europe.
But the thing is as well, if he's coming, he's got to come quickly. And he'll know that more than anybody, I'm sure. But it's so much about experience. And I don't know exactly what age he is, but he's, in terms of experience, he's very young here because he's done nothing. So he's got to come and regardless of whatever car you come in, just come and try and do some recce's or whatever.
I think that's absolutely right. Well, let's talk then about a young driver who has been making waves for a few years now, and does now have that experience. And obviously we're in Stoke-on-Trent, which is in the UK and England. We are slightly biased. We try not to be, but we are slightly biased towards UK drivers. Let's talk about young Chris Ingram. Where does he sit right now?
He sits, I think, is at 1 point off the lead of the European Rally Championship. So, his stated aim at the start of the year was to be the first Brit since Vic Elford or somebody to win the European Championship. He's progressing nicely. He's struggling with a lack of budget. I've got to be honest, I thought he would put up more of a fight in Liepāja at the last round than he did. I was a little bit surprised. But it's difficult, the guy's driving with one eye on the budget and not wanting to make it. He knows his next mistake will probably be his last. And
he needs, the championship, the pressure of having to score points for the championship must be curbing the speed fractionally. I'm sure it must.
It must be. But I think, we need to see him winning rallies. It depends, doesn't it? You know, I mean, one of Richard Burns' big things in 2003, he wanted to win the World Rally Championship and was on course to win the World without winning a rally, to show the importance of consistency. Absolutely, you need it, but Burnsy had showed massive speed by then. We need Chris to show the speed, but how you do that when you're balancing a championship and a massively tight budget, I don't know.
And he needs to get into the World Championship. He needs to start doing, you know, I think he's done, what has he done? He's done Germany in the past. Did he do Germany a couple of years ago? He's done GB a few times, but, you know, we talk about the Bateses needing to get across here. It's really similar for drivers in the European Rally Championship. It's very important for them to get across. Which other drivers in the European Rally Championship do you think might... Oh, look who this is! He's good, he worked out, he's good. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really nice to be joined this morning. What a surprise to find him sitting in my living room. Nikolay Gryazin. Now listen, you're going to swap seats, boys. Nikolay, I'm very sorry. Swap seats. We did discuss this beforehand. It is a bit of a surprise, not a total surprise, clearly. Nikolay Gryazin. Nikolay, listen, what we're talking about this morning at the kitchen table with my Oregon Trail Rally mug. Neither of these boys wanted a mug this morning. I do have a selection of them.
Nikolai's just arrived.
We just arrived, yeah, of course, so we don't have one ready for him.
Would you like a cup of tea, Nikolay?
Would you like a cup of tea?
Yeah, if it's possible. With milk.
Put the kettle on. With milk, put the kettle on. We'll let David Evans go and put the kettle on while I talk to Nikolay. Nikolay, we're talking about young drivers, and we're talking about young drivers and their ambitions to get to the very top and their potential to get to the very top. Now, we've seen you progressing from the European Championship. We saw you putting in a great performance last week in Portugal with some incredible times. But I think it's fair to say not many people know an awful lot about you. So, while we've got you at the kitchen table and David Evans is making a cup of tea with my nice kettle, let's talk then a little bit, if you don't mind, about the early days for Nikolay Gryazin. I would like to know how you got started in rallying, because you come from Russia. It's not a huge sport in Russia. How did you get started?
I get started because my father was driving on in a rally, and he was driving on a WRC Toyota Corolla in 1 year, in WRC.
In Russia? He had that, or in the WRC?
In WRC, in some rounds.
I knew that.
Have you done your homework, David Evans?
I knew that.
Seriously, tell us about that then. Tell us, which rounds did he do in the Corolla?
I know he made Corsica, Portugal also.
Wow.
I need to check it, but no, not too much, because it's really expensive to drive on WRC car. But yeah, it was quite big journey for him, and also he was the champion of Russia in rally. And this years it was big, competitors, very tough fights. Now it's a little bit enough, another, but in this years it was, it's too much fast guys in Russia was.
Yeah.
So tell us about your first memory then. What is your first memory of rallying? I assume it's your dad rallying somewhere. When did you actually think, wow, this is a sport that maybe I want to get involved in?
Honestly, when I was a child, we have a big accident with mother and brother, and I was not thinking about any races at all until
a car crash.
Yes, in the road, and until 14 years, I just think about maybe to start with the go-karts.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, and we start driving, and you need to understand, I don't like the car roar,
Right.
RPMs, and I was not pushing full throttle on the cars.
So in your head, because it took you back to the terrible accident that you had.
Yes, and after it's getting better and better, time improving, and we start sport cars. And I was mixing sport cars with the real driving car.
Yeah.
It was Lada Granta Cup in Russia. Yes, it was a very nice experience. And after I made my full season in touring car in Russia and makes second place in overall.
How old were you when you were doing the touring cars?
16 or 17, I think 16, yeah. And after my brother was also driving in rallying, and he was finished his professional career, and my father was asking, maybe you want to try. And I think my first tests was on a Ford Fiesta S2000, and my brother was teaching me, and for me it just was I don't like it, because it's too fast. I can take it.
Yeah, no, I'm holding it. I'm holding it. It's my microphone.
Yeah,
I'm holding it.
It was really scary for me because it's everywhere trees and it's too much, and you need to you need to drive in like drift. For me, just I don't know how to manage it. And
so that's really interesting for me because a lot of young drivers talk about the experience they get from tarmac, but tarmac rallying and karting probably doesn't even give you half the experience you need. As you say, once you get onto the gravel and you get amongst the trees and the car starts sliding, those are completely different disciplines that you need to learn very quickly.
Yeah, and but circuit racing is give you really good school how to analyze the road, how to be faster, when to brake later. And it's a big advantage if you start from karting or some racing circuits.
But also, you started in a four-wheel drive car, in an S2000 car, you say?
It was just testing.
Yeah, but you never really drove a front-wheel drive or a rear-wheel drive, and Lado was maybe...
Only a front-wheel drive.
Yeah. So it's quite a jump. Is that your...
That's my helicopter just coming for the next guest. Who could that be?
Is he bringing the mics?
Yeah, he's bringing the mics. Honestly, we did order some microphones. They just didn't get here in time. Wouldn't be the kitchen table if it was too professional. So you've progressed. You had the chance in the team because your brother was retiring in the rally team. It's quite a big step from that to the ERC, isn't it? And that was that your first step in terms of a proper championship?
I was started in Latvian championship. Yeah, it's like acknowledge with the pace notes and even how to drive in gravel.
When you were 16 still.
Yeah, that's why gravel is more preferred for me. But now tarmac is also good, but it's quite 50.
Corsica. You're clearly not bad on tarmac.
Now we are working on each direction. So after we came to ERC, it was very difficult for me because my ambitions was like I want to be faster and faster, but the skills was not so good. And I was crashing every stages, and so it was not very good. But we made too much races for for experience. So that's why on the third year on the Skoda, when we start driving on the Skoda, it's getting better, less crashing. And in 2018, it was like I think one crash in a year, and we won under 28 championship. So it's quite good result. And now we are trying to WRC2 for gain experience of the road.
How difficult has it been the step from ERC to WRC2? We saw you in Sweden for the first time, wasn't it? I remember talking to you in Sweden, and you were quite nervous about the move because suddenly you're surrounded by all of these WRC stars, and it's a very
interviewed by people like David Evans. I know it's hard.
Very obviously, but. It was a difficult step, wasn't it?
It's like mental. It's difficult because it's a big race. It's not ERC, it's not European. It's just world championship. Every famous guy drives there, and for sure it's a little bit mentally difficult. You don't want to be to make a stupid mistake, just crashing in first stage, and that's why I was a little bit nervous about this because I think about how to be fast and how to not have problems, and for sure now on the third race and second race was a little more calm because you start to understand how it works. So it's not like new races. It's more distance, but it's still the same races.
But also,
it's still the same.
I like this.
But also, by the time we got to Portugal last week, you've done the recce with people. You've been around these people, haven't you? And you kind of feel more at home because when you go to Sweden for the first time, it's difficult because everything's new. The way that the recce is the same, but it's
other than that you're wrecking with Ogier, with Tanak.
Yeah,
even that I imagine can be quite intimidating.
Totally, but I think I felt in Portugal you started to look much more cool and calm and relaxed.
As if you belonged.
Yeah.
Did you feel more in Portugal as if you were part of the WRC rather than someone coming from the ERC? You were actually part of the WRC.
For sure, because you know each other now, and you know the skills of everybody, and you just know what you could expect. So
I want to ask you about something. Sorry to cut you off, because you talk a lot there. I like this. I like your approach. You talk a lot about having to learn to cut the mistakes out. there's no talk about having to go faster. You know that you've got the speed, but you know that having speed alone is not everything in rallying. You know, you can't, and we saw it with the last Russian in the championship, Novikov. Novikov had the most phenomenal speed, but had very little rally craft. He didn't know how to work his way around the rally. What you've identified very early on is that rally craft is as important as speed, and learning how to actually work your way through a rally without making mistakes to make the most of the experience is as important as speed.
For sure, but for me, it's I think more important to be more on the speed, because you know you can make the craft like you said, and I think it's not a big problem to do it. But to be fast, it's more.
But my point is, you're not worried about the speed because you know you have the speed. The speed is there.
No, I'm worried about it.
Are you?
Yeah, because like in Portugal, we have some big loses time, and we were working after each day to understand what's missing, how to be faster. And it's really difficult.
But your first time in Portugal, you know, only your fourth WRC start. You know, the trouble is, I think one of the issues that we have with young guys like yourself coming in, everybody's measuring themselves against Kalle Rovanperä, who has been competing for not competing maybe at the highest level, but he's been driving since he was 8. And you know, with the best will in the world, every now and then you get these, and don't take this the wrong way, Kalle, but freaks. And potentially he is that freak that is just so good.
Yeah.
And so almost take Kalle out of the equation.
Totally. And manage expectations.
Yeah.
You have to manage expectations. But with that in mind then, tell us what the plan is, Nikolay. I mean, you've come from the ERC, you've proven your speed in the ERC, you've taken the step up to WRC2. Where are we going? Where is the plan for the remainder of this year and then for coming years?
For me, it's the top plan, the top targets for sure to be a World Rally champion. But it's big journey, and for now it's just to getting more.
Did I see a bloke in the garden? Is that my microphone's just turned up?
Can I go out and have a look?
Go out and have a look, just to prove that we got the microphones. So, we have had, your dad's been in the World Rally Championship. We've had a number of Russians, but as I mentioned earlier, obviously Novikov was the most prominent in the last few years. It's a difficult journey. It's a journey that will take some time. How long have you got? You know, that's the problem we often find with young drivers. They try to do it all in one season, maybe 2 seasons, and it's just not long enough. How long is your plan?
It depends, because we need to see if we will be progressing. We will continue until the end, because we need to. It's like ambitions. It's all what I can do now, and it's my passion, and we'll do it, you know, and until the end, push to the limit. But you need to understand. You need to improve to learn. It's never like you can say I know how to drive fast. Sometimes you can find something.
Learning. There's always something. It's the window cleaner. It's not
someone else.
Not the window cleaner.
No. Do you know what? I really do like your approach. You've got a very impressive demeanour about you.
And the fact that you understand that you will always keep learning.
Yeah,
you know, always. There's always something, and it's so much we said it already about experience.
That's why also if you win, it's not good, because you can relax and I win, but you start learning, you stop working.
You have to continually challenge yourself, and you know, we talk about the managing expectations. You have to be realistic in winning. That when you win, you are not the next world champion, and when you lose, well, there's no reason why you shouldn't be the next world champion, as long as you take from whatever scenario you find yourself in. It's something we talked about at the weekend. You know, being self-critical is actually really important. You know, if every mistake you make, if every failure you have is someone else's fault, then you never learn. Yeah. You know, you have to be honest with yourself, in that when you win, you have to know why you won, and you have to maintain your equilibrium. And when you lose or when you make a mistake, you need to be able to identify why you made that mistake and move on from it. One of the best at that was Hayden Paddon in the past. He was brilliant. Never dwelt on mistakes, but always learned from them. Listen, Nikolay, very much appreciate you turning up. I don't know how you found us here at the kitchen table. Such a surprise this morning. It really was. Tell me about the next event then. Where are we going to see you next?
Rally Sardinia.
Can't wait to see you there. We're all off to Sardinia just this time next week, David Evans.
This time next week, yeah. Should we make the cup of tea now?
We'll make the cup of tea now, but folks,
I couldn't open the fridge door.
Couldn't open the fridge door and the noise the kettle was making. Guys, listen, really appreciate you joining us at the kitchen table today. It's been an absolute joy to have David Evans from Autosport and Motorsport News, Nikolay Gryazin from the WRC2 Championship. Hopefully, in the future, we might be able to persuade one or two more people to knock on the door and join us at the kitchen table. Watch this kid. He is going places. Thank you very much for joining us from the kitchen table. Well done, boys.